Hello, beautiful soul. In this video, I want to talk about why, even if a person who has a really big desire to change, however, they've been behaving in these fear-based toxic dynamics for their whole life, and they've got someone in front of them who's the perfect match for them and requires more from them, why that person cannot change even if they wanted to. So the first one is they've got ingrained patterns, ingrained relational patterns that they've kind of played out their whole life. They've done everything the same way their whole life. It's ingrained. They don't actually know how to show up in any other way. Like, this is just their pattern of behavior. It's without an actual concerted effort of them going out of their way to read about it, learn about it, understand how to show up and actually have the self-awareness to change that behavior. It's not going to change. Start within themselves and think, if I want to change my reality, I have to start with myself. They're looking outside of themselves for their reality to change for them because their intention changed or their desire changed. So they're not actually taking that accountability upon themselves. And the second thing I want to mention is that lack of awareness. Like, if someone doesn't have an understanding or awareness of their thoughts, feelings, actions, how those actions impact on other people, basically what chaos they're causing in their own lives, then they're not going to change because they're not going to be aware of their toxic patterns of behavior. They're not going to actually be aware of what they need to change the outcomes that they're seeing in their life. And the only place that we learn self-awareness is by taking accountability when something comes up, when someone mentions something, taking accountability for that, not just necessarily accepting what we're being told about ourselves, but sitting with it, thinking about it, reflecting on it, looking at how this behavior could be perceived by other people, thinking about how this behavior would feel if it was happening to us, like these sorts of things. People who are behaving in toxic ways, who have these dynamics that do that, don't actually do that. They don't sit and reflect upon things. They don't take accountability and own their mistakes. Everything is everyone else's fault. They deflect blame. They're not actually taking accountability for their actions, for the consequences for their actions, and for the actions that are needed to change that behavior moving forward. And the next thing I want to mention is this is probably because of deep-seated emotional issues, most likely relational patterns from childhood, most likely abandonment fears. There could be schemas present. There could be insecure attachment style. People don't behave in toxic ways. People don't harm each other. People don't manipulate each other, who are healthy and happy and whole within themselves. People who target other people, who manipulate other people, who treat other people with disrespect, who use other people, who are selfish, these people have issues. There's just no other way to look at it. And if they've been doing it for a really long time, if they're like adults and they're not taking accountability and responsibility for these issues, that's just going to be the way they live for the rest of their lives. That's going to be their normal. And so not addressing these emotional issues, not being willing to be vulnerable is a reason, the biggest reason, that these patterns of behavior continue. And my advice is to have that awareness, have that understanding that if someone's not looking at their issues, if someone's not actively working on themselves, like doing the actual work, getting vulnerable, going to therapy, doing spiritual healing, like whatever healing methods or modalities that work, and it might be about trying a few different ones, if they're not actually doing that, then their relational patterns are going to stay the same. Even if they have the biggest desire to change, even if they're trying their hardest, they're not going to be able to, because those issues are still going to be there. And they actually get triggered and come up in relational dynamics. Like, even if we're not experiencing certain things, even if things aren't being triggered in everyday life, in our everyday like relational dynamics, when we get into intimate partnership dynamics, these things actually show up. These things are triggered. It's just the way it works. There's no avoiding it. And it's about understanding what the triggers are and knowing, because we've been to therapy or we've been learning about ourselves, how to manage it when it happens. Like, what are the tools that are needed to manage this so that we can heal things over time. So what may happen is that they may have a desire to change, a desire to grow, a desire to improve their situation, their life, the dynamics that are around them, and then not have the tools because they haven't done the work. They get triggered, and then they most likely will just fall back into the same old toxic relational patterns. They'll go back to what's comfortable. They'll go back to what they're familiar with, thinking that comfort and familiarity is safe, it's good, when actually comfort and familiarity, if you've come from a really toxic childhood, for example, like I did, is the worst thing, because it shows that no growth has happened. If we're wanting to stay in toxic comfort zones and we're not actually doing the work, that's all we're going to get. Change requires vulnerability. Vulnerability can be really uncomfortable. Vulnerability can feel like we're not in control, like we're losing control. It touches the deepest parts of ourselves, our insecurities, our deep-seated fears. So it's really hard, because when we're in this state of, I know what I'm familiar with, I know what I'm comfortable with, I know how to control things so that I'm not at risk in any way in terms of being hurt, because when we're living from a place of fear, from a place of insecurity, we do everything in our power to not be hurt. And this is particularly around people with insecure attachment styles, other types of issues, other types of emotional traumas. We put things in place to protect ourselves from getting hurt. I was a fearful avoidant. So I would really desire and crave emotional connection, deep connection, relationships, but I didn't have the skills and the tools to manage my insecure attachment style. So that would come in to protect me, and it would cause all this harm in the process. And so it's important to recognize that just because somebody wants to change, it doesn't mean that they actually have the capacity to do that until they're doing the work. So understanding this has the potential to really save time, save getting emotionally invested into someone who isn't going to be able to show up in a way that's emotionally safe, and in a way that someone who has done the work and who does show up in a kind, caring, respectful way actually deserves. So I hope this has helped someone. I love you. Bye.